Lawrence Kohlberg initially created his theory of moral development when he was in graduate school in psychology at the University of Chicago. He became interested in how psychology and morality intersected, but he found behaviorism, which was very popular at the time, unsatisfying. Behaviorism explained morality as simple internalization of external cultural or parental rules. But Kohlberg was drawn to Jean Piaget's description of an individual's own moral reasoning as the basis for moral decision-making. Piaget suggested that one's moral reasoning depended on where they were in their cognitive development process, which proceeded according to fixed hierarchical stages. Beginning with research with adolescent males, Kohlberg expanded on Piaget's stages and developed a model with 3 levels of development, each of which included 2 stages of reasoning. Kohlberg saw the second stage in each level as more advanced and organized than the first. At the pre-conventional level, decisions are made according to rules and standards as individuals know them from parents and other adults with whom they have regular contact. In stage 1, rules are followed in order to avoid punishment, and in stage 2, rules are followed to gain some benefit. Fairness to others starts to show up, but only as it has the potential to improve one's own situation. At the conventional level, the social awareness of the individual expands outside of the self to include peers and the expectations of society at large. In the first stage of this level, stage 3, individuals develop a sense of what social conventions dictate it means to be a good student, a good worker, a good neighbor, etc., and they conclude that they'll get along better with others if they follow those dictates. In the second stage of this level, stage 4, individuals can see the benefits of adhering to the larger social order, that rules that apply equally to everyone keep things running smoothly. At the post-conventional level, the individual is able to define moral values and principles away from the parameters put in place by authorities or laws. In stage 5, although laws are still seen as useful, individuals are able to perceive when a law isn't working anymore and will disobey it if it contradicts personal values or will work to change it to make it more just for more people in the social contract. In stage 6, moral reasoning is seen to involve only an appeal to conscience, which at this stage is perfectly aligned with personally held principles of ethics and morality that are perceived as logical, universal, and consistent.
One of Kohlberg's students, James Rest, disputed the fixed nature of the stages, suggesting that an individual might demonstrate moral reasoning from different stages depending on the situation. There is some evidence that this is true at all ages. Although he never accepted the idea that there could be fluidity among the stages, Kohlberg did eventually agree that a person could either advance through the stages quickly or could remain in a very early stage of moral development for her or his entire life. Kohlberg developed a test for the moral reasoning behind these different stages, which he called the moral judgment test, in which subjects were asked by trained interviewers how they would solve specific examples of hypothetical moral dilemmas and why they thought the way they did. A famous example of these is the Heinz dilemma, in which a man is forced to choose between letting his wife die from a rare cancer or stealing life-saving medicine from the greedy chemist who invented it. Kohlberg was only interested in the reasons given for the interviewees' choices, and the interviewers were trained to ask follow-up questions such as, would it change anything if Heinz did not love his wife? What if the person dying was a stranger? Would it make any difference? Should the police arrest the chemist for murder if the woman died? Respondents were assigned to a stage of moral development based on the answers to these questions. For example, at stage 2, when an individual's moral judgment is motivated by the desire for a reward, the thinking might be he should steal the medicine for his wife because she is nice and pretty. The test was revised and refined over many years and translated into numerous languages in an effort to increase its empirical validity across ages, genders, and cultures.
This idea of being able to identify developmental stages in moral reasoning appealed to educators in the same way Piaget had, because it explained development and purported to give some guidance as to what instructional methods would be most useful in helping students to progress from one stage to the other. Both Kohlberg and Piaget believed that providing examples and instructions from the next stage up would enable a student to assimilate those higher-order schemas of judgment. For example, to help a student think more about how their behavior affects others, a teacher would provide opportunities to take part in establishing rules of conduct, as well as making self-reflection part of any disciplinary consequences. The presumption favored the hegemony of reason, suggesting that the more rational about moral decisions a person was, the more ethical their behavior would be. But is this true? Numerous studies have demonstrated the effect of economic circumstances, social pressure, and power differentials on ethical decision-making. The famous Stanford prison experiment, in which 24 white male college students were randomly assigned guard and prisoner roles in a mock prison situation, horrified participants and experimenters alike with the range of behavior changes that emerged.
I had really thought that I was incapable of this kind of behavior. I was surprised, no, I was dismayed to find out that I could really be that I could act in a manner so absolutely unaccustomed to anything I would even really dream of doing. And while I was doing it, I didn't feel any regret. I didn't feel any guilt. It was only afterwards, when I began to reflect on what I had done, that this behavior began to dawn on me, and I realized that this was a part of me I hadn't really noticed before.
Expectations about the behavior of educated adults were similarly contradicted in the famous Milgram experiment, in which a majority of subjects obeyed instructions to continue delivering increasingly powerful shocks to a victim when they weren't aware the shock machine was fake and the victims were actors. But even without the experiments, how many of us have experienced a situation in which we would have been perfectly capable of making a moral judgment reflecting a later stage in Kohlberg's theory, but chose to do something stupid or risky anyway? Almost any group could come up with a list of things in this category, from shoplifting on a dare all the way to drinking and driving or risky sexual behavior. Since Kohlberg's ideology was bound to a method that relied heavily on hypothetical answers to hypothetical dilemmas, real-world factors in decision-making, such as peer pressure, cost-benefit analysis, and imminent danger, were left out of the equation.
Although Kohlberg eventually conceded that his theory does not provide a complete description of moral development, the structure and ideas behind it continue to exclude so much that it would still be easy to abuse. For example, one of Carol Gilligan's criticisms is that it elevates a justice-centered morality over a caring-centered morality, thus not accurately measuring moral decision-making among those who empathize relationships over the law. This might lead to considering many women, or a collectivist culture like China, Korea, or Japan, as lower in moral reasoning than many men, or an individualist culture like the United States. The combination of this blindness to culture and temperament and emotion could lead to a kind of moral profiling, assuming a higher likelihood of moral behavior for those who speak the language of higher moral reasoning, and a lower likelihood of moral behavior for those who do not. Are those who score higher, or who are assumed because of stereotyping to have higher scores, considered to be nicer? Are higher scores more valuable, and therefore given preferential treatment in college admissions, hiring, immigration, and the justice system? This could have implications for how power and privilege is distributed in all sorts of situations. It even has implications for future technology as we teach morality to artificial intelligence. At the surface, it sounds sensible that better moral judgment will lead to more ethical behavior, but a title of an article by one of Kohlberg's critics sums up the disconnect. Why act on Kohlberg's moral judgments, or how to reach stage 6 and remain a bastard? The very act of answering interview questions could be a reflection of moral development. What is the flow of power in the interview? Do you answer the way you think the authority figure, the interviewer, wants you to answer? If you do, is it for approval or to compete with other subjects or to game the system? Kohlberg deserves credit for continuing to make adjustments to his theory in response to critics. Given that moral reasoning is one factor among many in influencing behavior decisions, he should also be credited for his career-long goal of creating a more just society by developing programs to provide moral education. By using the discussion of dilemmas, Kohlberg acknowledges that decisions often reflect the presence of competing moral priorities. But in Kohlberg's rational view, those are almost always competing rights or justice rather than competing responsibilities like care or relationships. One has to wonder how he would have scored his own final moral decision, to take his own life.